Every person's story has something to teach us. How others view life, how obstacles are overcome, how joy is felt, how fears are faced, how love is expressed. The Matters of Faith podcast explores individual stories of people's lives and how faith plays a part. It may not be your story, but it may help shape yours. And now, Matters of Faith with your host, Jay Wilburn.
You found the Matters of Faith podcast on Project Entertainment Network with your host, Jay Wilburn. My guest today is going to be Edward Jay McFadden. We talk about a number of subjects and go very much in depth into writing. And now we'll get into the rest of the episode. This is the Matters of Faith podcast on Project Entertainment Network with your host, Jay Wilburn. My guest today is Edward Jay McFadden. Welcome to the program, Edward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Did you have any connection with faith as you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised Roman Catholic. Be honest, never really kind of bought very much into it. So I think faith is kind of something you find from within. And when it comes to religion specifically, you know, I'm not big on the organized religions, to be honest, but, I'm kind of like a Star Wars, guy when it comes to faith. I believe maybe there is something. I don't believe it's a guy or a gal in a white robe, but there does seem to be something out there, and I just don't know what it is. So I guess my faith is pretty thin.
What was it about it that didn't connect with you when you're young? Because a lot of times when you are young, you kind of just accept what your parents tell you about the universe. So what sort of didn't do that for you at a young age, I guess?
I guess I picked up at a very young age that it's God's plan thing just didn't ring with me. I mean, I saw my grandfather die. As a kid, you register certain images, right? And I guess, picked up more on the bad than the good. I'm guessing now, what they'd say if they got me on the couch. So I kind of went that way, and it made it hard to reconcile that with what, I was being told in religious education and in church. I think there's like really varying levels in all this. I have no problem with religion. I think organized religion does a lot of good things in the world. It's not all bad. But when they try and make you live a certain way, that's also kind of where it just kind of turned me off. I mean, there's plenty of organized religions where that's not the case, right? But I wasn't exposed to that. So you asked about, as a childhood, I was exposed to the Roman Catholic Church, which is a pretty strict doctrine. And at the time too, there was, and still today, there's a little bit of nastiness going on that also turned my stomach, and the lack of effort to try and correct it upset me a little bit. But every organization has guilty things they do to survive, and religious organizations are really no different. This new pope, he seemed refreshing at first. So it's like they're trying, to bring this stuff into the next generation, because they see the numbers dropping off terribly, with youth. And, that's an issue for them going forward. So they have to change their message a little bit.
As you went forward, how did you sort of shape your own view and identify yourself and figure out who you were and that sort of thing?
I don't identify as an atheist. I guess I identify as a Catholic because that's how I was raised, a non-practicing Catholic, I would say. But I was baptized, and my daughter was baptized, and but that's about as far as it goes. My parents are older now, and they're much more into it now because I think it fills a space, which is one of the good things. It's kind of what writing does too. Quite honestly, it's very similar. It fills some space that helps you get through this craziness, and I'm all for that. I just don't like the manipulation part. And but when you're older and wiser, you tend not to see that. My father doesn't even see those parts. He only tends to see the good because it fills something for him. And I guess maybe what I'm saying is maybe my opinion will change over time. It has already. When I was younger, this would have been a much different answer.
Right, right,
After
right.
living on this rock for 50 years, you're like, you can't totally push all of this aside, because faith, in its definition of the actual word, I took it right to religion, which is kind of, how I think of it. But, there's many ways to think of faith. And it really comes from here, I think, and what you believe and what you live your life by, ethics. If you will, I kind of, associate it with. But it gets tied up in religion because they try to teach you these things. I hate to use the word indoctrination, but in some cases, that's exactly what it is. I don't believe I was indoctrinated, but, I was a kid. I probably was. You go to religious education and they teach you some strange things. Really kind of weird what we tell children sometimes. And I didn't do this. I didn't really raise my daughter in any church, and it was just a kind of a decision my wife and I made. It was like, if she decides that this is something she wants to go to, we'll support her 100%. But I didn't want to go that route because, I don't know, I guess I didn't like that I was pushed that route. I had to go. I mean, I don't know about you, Jay, but I mean, like, I had to go to religious education. So again, it's like picking your career, I think, in a way. How do you, you teach a young kid something that complex and put that kind of thing on them? I don't see how they could make an educated decision. They just don't have enough time. So it tends to be, hey, your mom and dad, as you said,
Right.
you're gods, right? Until they're 12 or whatever it is.
When did writing become a part of your life?
I talked about it I wrote a thing called Deconstructing Tolkien years and years ago, which was basically a fan treatise. And I discovered in that it really was when I first read Lord of the Rings when I was 12. And I think, I just kind of I finished that book, and I had never read anything. I mean, I'd read some stuff, but nothing that really stuck with me. And I wanted to, I felt the way I felt, I wanted to make people feel. I was happy. I was sad. The story was over. I was so aggravated. I wanted it to go on. And I said to myself, I want to do that to somebody. I want to be able to tell a tale that makes people care so much that they're actually aggravated when it's over or upset when it's over. And that's when I got the first tinge, but I didn't get serious until years and years and years and years and later. I was a magazine editor for a while. I kind of wanted to write, and then I got sucked into the small press vortex of the 90s. And I was in, you've been around a while, I always talk to Armand about this. We joke about how we used to have to haul the actual mail bags to the post office and do the sorts in the living room and all that kind of stuff. So it's like I got into that. I kind of got pulled into that away from writing. I kind of got sucked into it, and that took over my life for a decade or so, creatively. And then I got serious, I don't know, only about 5 or 6 years ago. Writing's a strange thing. I'm not the sharpest tool. I'm also not the dullest, I hope. But, I thought I had writing down. And, I didn't. You really learn as you go on that there's so many finer points to the craft of writing and to developing a story that's not just for you. I'm not writing for writers anymore. I'm trying to write for readers, people who enjoy reading and want to be entertained. And once I made that transition and I took the craft a lot more seriously, I think my writing improved tremendously. And then, of course, I just started writing a lot. That's the key. Tom Piccarelli told me that years ago. You just got to write every day. You got to put 1,000 down every day. I was like, oh, what you got to be kidding me. But that's the key. That's the key, though, I think, if you could do that. And then that's how I came to it. And I wrote a book called Awake, which Severed Press took. That led to a whole bunch of novels. And since then, there's been a bunch. I think my next one I'm going to start will be number 24, which is, for me, yeah.
Now, back in the 90s, I know from Armand, he was doing a lot of the zines where it was stapled and mailed. Is that where you started, or were you doing a different type of magazine?
I'm looking on my shelf here.
Yeah.
See that? There you go. So yes, it was a saddle stapled, and again, but it just got out of hand. We did a pretty decent job apparently, and by the third And at that time too, I started going to cons, Jay, and that
Yeah.
made a big difference in back then it was like, we had a table, and, Warren Lapine and I of Absolute Magnitude would share a table, and we'd share all expenses. And it was just, a sales thing. And it grew, and I picked up a lot of subscriptions at these cons. And we did mailers. We were one of the first kind of small press magazines to do a big fancy mailer, and we mailed it out to the science fiction book club, I think, and got a real bad response. But we picked up, at one point I had 1,000 subscribers. I was on the newsstands. We were printing 10,000 copies, and by the third issue it was full color cover, and then it grew to full size, full color, and there was a couple issues that were color inside. And then it became Fantastic Stories of the Imagination, and then the bottom fell out of the distribution industry, and all those magazines died. The small press basically died the end of the 80s or whatever it was. And then I was stagnant for a while. I struggled to write my first book. It was a real challenge, and then once I got over that, and it's still unpublished. And then when I got over that, I kind of picked up. But I didn't hit the pace I'm hitting now. Now I feel I'm on a steady. I feel now I write at a professional pace where I can generate at least semi-coherent stories with not too much effort.
I remember Fantastic. Did Private Writings become Fantastic, or were those two separate
Yeah,
things?
yeah. There's
Okay.
an issue. I won't dive off screen again, but there was actually an issue where both names appeared on the cover. So it kind of did become it, but not really. Pirate Writings was pretty varied. I did the subtitle was mystery, suspense, and science fiction. So I tried to pick up a lot of genres. When it went to Fantastic Stories of the Imagination, that was a pure kind of speculative fiction magazine, only fantasy and SF, the mystery. I mean, there's mystery components and everything, right? So I always tried to get that in there, but we narrowed the focus a little bit once it became Fantastic Stories. And it was only a few issues. There was only 5, 6, 7 issues or something like that. The DNA was the whole system was going down at that time.
Was that time period getting in the way of your writing?
Absolutely, 150%. It stopped me. Essentially, I had met an old friend at a party, and he was a poet, and we got a real poet, a decent poet. Never did anything with it, but was not just some hack. And we got into talking, and and at the time I was cranking out a few short stories. I had a few sales, and I was upset and disappointed with the quality of the small press magazines, and we started talking about how much better of a job we could do, and that was the end. And then Pirate Writings was a mistake. The name was a mistake. We thought Pirate Writings, cutting edge pirates is what we were thinking. It was so stupid in retrospect because the distributors, it can just confused everybody. And I'd have Gardner Dozois walking up to me going, oh, what is this about pirates? I'm like, no, there's a space guy on the cover. You can see that. But it was, we made so many mistakes along the way, but the thing just continued to grow. And that totally pushed my writing away. I wrote nothing, basically, from 94 to 2004. For that whole decade, I basically, I'm sorry. I wish. I got to go back way further than that, actually. But I didn't write anything for a long period of time because of it. It was a wall, an enjoyable wall. I met a lot of people that I still keep in touch with to this day. And I call good friends from those years. And it's been a long time. And it was very fulfilling. It's cool to be able to go grab my stack of magazines. And it was sad to see it go. But this writing was what got me into it. It basically killed my writing. And then when that died, that's when I started to slowly crawl out of my shell a little bit.
One of the things I've enjoyed a great deal, just speaking broadly, is the monster books that Severed Press put out. And they tap several different authors, and a number of authors will get kind of a regular gig there, where their books are connecting and going through. You seem to be one of those authors. I'm seeing a lot of those dinosaur and monster books in your catalog. Is that a direction you were going anyway, or just getting connected with Severed Press kind of say, well, I'm going to write another one of these?
Yeah, it's all that. I mean, they bought. I'm not. It's like I'm not about the money, right? That's because we're poor. But so I like to say, I want to be read.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I'm to that point in my career now where I think I'm working hard enough that that's what's important to me. The fact that, you know, thousands of people are going to read these books is pretty cool.
yeah,
So what I did was, you know, I've talked with Armand about this and other guys. I wrote this book Awake. It was kind of, you know, a zombie book, but not really. It was more I Am Legend-ish,
yeah.
you know, which aren't really shambling zombies. They're more, you know, vampire-ish kind of. They didn't like the dark and stuff. So that's the way I went. And it didn't do very well. But they approached me. You know, the guy, Gary, the head guy there, approached me and said, I like your writing. This didn't really work for us, but start hitting me with proposals. So I went through his catalog. And the one that jumped out at me immediately was, you know, the sea thrillers, the sea monster books, because,
Right.
you know, I've been on the Great South Bay since I was a little kid. I did time in the Coast Guard. I had a boat myself. I used to fish. So this was an area of familiarity for me. And the Breach was the first one, and it did fantastic. And it was a spur of the moment. I was on the boat with my brother-in-law. We were actually going by the actual breach here on Long Island. Fire Island hurricane created a breach to the ocean. And I was like, man, what kind of stuff must get sucked through there? Boop, there's my teaser. I wrote the proposal. He got back to me. I wrote the book in like 45 days, and it's been really good. It had a book club proposal. It was a bestseller for, you know, a little while. And a lot of people read it and they really enjoyed it. It's kind of a crime thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me started. And then I didn't know what to do. You know, honestly, Jay, I was like, man, you know, because I wasn't used to writing 4 books a year at the time or 3
Oh,
books a
right.
year. It was, you know, it was a yearly process. So here I am, I'm done. And I'm like, wow, you know, what do I do? So I wanted to keep the momentum going. And so I took a look a little deeper and I saw, you know, I have an SF background, you know, that's my core, even though I say Lord of the Rings and Poe. Really, when I read as a kid, and watched TV, I was a Star Trek kid. I was science fiction. So I saw a real avenue with the dino thrillers to just tap that. And that's what I do. I find that incredibly easy. And, you know, it all goes back to Land of the Lost. You know, for me, I don't, you know, you know, and the 4:30 movie,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the daytime forgot and stuff like that. So that's what I draw on. I loved it. I still enjoy it. You know, I showed my daughter, who's only 18, but when she was little, I showed her the DVDs of Land of the Lost, and she still remembers it. You know, how campy it was, but she remembers all the stories and she remembers the characters, and, you know, that stuck with me. So it comes from there. So I did pick those 2 things. And then my first Dino book was Throwback, and that kicked butt. That's still
Yeah.
kicking. You know, and people liked it. They hated the ending. You know, they didn't love my ending because I didn't give them what they wanted. But
Yeah.
and then that just kind of started. But I learned from that, Jay. You know, you talk about that in writing. You know, I ended Throwback the way I wanted to end Throwback. You know, and I've learned since then that, you know, the book's not for me. You know,
Yeah.
it's to entertain people. And if I would have had a different ending, they would have been more entertained. So you know, I'm not like I'm reading and judging changing my stories, but I learn from it. You know, you kind of learn what your readers want. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I've done that in those 2 categories. So I continue. I just had one come out called Barracuda Swarm. I went a little different. I wrote a book called Cryptid Club, which is the one up on the, I don't know how to do it,
Yeah.
which is up on the screen there. It might be getting cut off a little bit. That one's doing really well too. It was it's a take on And Then There Was None. It's a cross between And Then There Was None and the Hunger Games. So it starts out with this kind of friendly competition, but it degenerates into a battle royale, and it's all the cryptids you can imagine. I went to town. They're all there represented, and it's doing okay. It just came out. So it's been good for me, and I've learned from it, and I've picked up some readers from it. I feel sometimes I move a little too fast with them, and, you know, my error rates in those are a little higher than I would like. But, you know, people are liking them and they're reading them. And when you see, you know, Drop Off almost has like 100 ratings on Goodreads already, and it's been out 3 months. So, you know, people are buying the book. You know, Amazon ratings don't lie. The thing's been sitting down there. People are enjoying it. So, you know, hey, good. I'm the only one that knows that it's got the mistake, the big mistake. And if someone else noticed it, they've been kind enough not to mention it. So yeah, Severed was for me now, but that's allowed me to do other things. To try and keep myself in a certain column, which is whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Quicksands and Sandbagged, which is the second one in the series, came from, and I'm working on the third one now. And later in life, I became a big fan of F. Paul Wilson, Repairman Jack, and I really enjoy Reacher. I understand it's fluff, but I really enjoy it. As a reader, I enjoy it. Bosch, these guys, these alpha males, and I bring a lot of that stuff into all of my books. I'm kind of one-dimensional that way. Most of my pro tags are male alphas, so don't really go into trying to write other people, because I don't know if I have the chops yet. I mean, I've written a little bit from a woman's perspective, but some of these other perspectives, I mean, I would never. I'm not. Hawk is an African American in Throwback, but he was an astronaut. So that's a stereotypical thing that I was comfortable doing. I'm not comfortable because I don't feel I've had the experience, and I feel like I would gloss over issues that, as a person of color, I should know. So I try and steer towards what I know with my protagonists. I'm an aging white dude, and I try and stay there, but it makes me kind of a little one-dimensional. I've been criticized for that, but those books, lend it to that. These action adventure novels. I really try and write what I know. I know that's an old adage, but that does put me at a disadvantage. I know a guy who writes just from the female perspective. He's got, he's comfortable with that. I just don't know that I am. What about you? Do you write from all these different ethnic POVs and from the female POV and all that?
I do. I don't know how successfully. I don't know that it's a conscious choice. Sometimes I'm just more interested in the person who's not me. So not even just identity changes. Like I'll write from perspectives of people who believe things I don't believe, and then try to write them honestly, to where it makes sense that a person would believe that. And I just find that character more interesting to me as a writer than someone who's just me. I already get why I think what I think, and I've never been a guy who's tried to write a proselytic idea into a book. So I'm never trying to convince anybody of anything. So even though I may believe something, it's not important to me that idea gets across in a story. Like typically I'll explore an idea I don't believe and actually try to make that work for a character or something like that. So I'm sure people can read a bunch of stories I've written and maybe conclude incorrectly of what I think or what I feel or those kind of things. But I've always kind of thought in the terms of like trusting the audience. So like whatever ideas are there, I just let them come to whatever conclusions they're going to come to. But I have tried to write from different perspectives, and one of my big series has a couple gay male characters who are the leads, and being a straight male, like I guess I would call it conscious respect, the idea of writing somebody who's not you, and kind of being aware as you're going through and any choices I'm making for the character. I'm like, okay, is this the right choice for the character, or am I falling into something safe, easy, stereotypical? Like if it feels like I'm going that direction just because my brain goes there faster, then maybe I take a step back and think, okay, is that right for the character, or is that just where my brain easily goes because that's what I've been conditioned to think, or that kind of thing. And then also, anytime you're writing anybody, whether the person looks like you or is somebody different, I always think in terms of don't try to write this person as the entire identity. So like if I'm writing a gay male character, he's not all gay men, he's himself. So he may make choices that are different from somebody that holds the same identity. And so it's important to think, okay, this is an individual and they don't represent everybody. So I can't make choices based on here's the entire social construct of a minority or of an identity or anything like that. You still have to think, okay, this is an individual, and how does this individual think? It's trickier, I think, than just writing myself. Yeah. And I still do that. I still write
I'm always
myself.
Nervous that I'm not going to be aware of some of those stereotypes.
Right.
That's like, I think I work nonstop. I'm never out. I have no clue. I really don't know what the a life of a gay man is like out there. I mean, I know what I see, but I think I would be. You hit exactly, I guess, on my fear that I'm gonna misinterpret, or I'm going to not even be aware of a stereotype,
right?
And then you end up offending people, and that's not why I'm in this game.
Right.
But what you're doing is definitely riskier, I think, and that comes down to, as a writer, you must take risks. Mm-hmm. And what I do with these male macho guys is they're always flawed. Every single one of them is flawed, and they're all flawed in different ways. Really, I write anti-heroes in many cases. I just discovered that a couple years ago. I started really looking at my characters, and I'm like, I really write anti-heroes because these people, their ethics are solid, and they try and do the right thing, but they've done some bad things.
Yeah.
And their reasoning isn't always sound. And that's drawing directly on my my life, So there are books, and then there are books, I think, and that I really do try and put them in two categories. So there's these severed adventure, fun, out there, books that are supposed to just be fun and enjoyable, and they're not supposed to be any message, and they're not supposed to convey any great meaning of life. You're supposed to sit down and read them in a couple of sittings and smile and laugh maybe and have some fun. And then there's books, like Quicksands or Dogs Get 10 Lives, which is up there, the audio cover's up there, which take a lot more time, require a lot more work. And then you delve a little bit more into these people and the people around them. Quicksands has a couple of characters. Anna, the main female lead in the book, has a couple of characters, and I stick to the story, because I always remember, King, I'm sure you've read On Writing. You said you're going through the thing. He talks in that book. That's a great book. I love that book. He talks in there about Carrie and how he threw the first couple of chapters in the garbage, and Tabitha pulled them out and spread them out and read them and said, this is really good stuff. I see why you threw it in the garbage, because women don't do this with a tampon, and they would never do that, and this and that. And she critiqued the work based on her experience as a female, because he was writing a female character, and that sent him back to the drawing board. But even in Carrie, King had written a woman, and he read it and said, I don't, and he crumpled Carrie up and threw it in the garbage. And until he got input from a woman who was able to, because you remember that locker room scene is what I'm talking about, the big setup, until he got input from his wife, who gave him, hey, no, this is really what happens in these female locker rooms, was he able to bring the story to the next, stage. But I guess it's like anything else, you learn, so if you write from a certain perspective over and over again, and you find that it's okay and people are enjoying it, then, you just have to take the chance.
Right.
So I try and take the chance in some of these other books, and mess with it. But it comes down to, I learn now that, I try and write within my confidence, within what I think I can achieve well. And I think that's a mistake so many writers make, not to judge people, but, they pick these epic stories that, and it's like, for your first novel, you really should just keep it, one perspective, linear plot, don't get very complicated, because they read these complicated novels and they love them and they think they can do them right out of the box. And most people can't. There's very few prodigies out there, right? We learn by doing, and most of the people that have any success in this business have stuck at it for years and years and years and years and years and years. You just, there's very few overnight successes in our little business here. So you have to take I try and, people say I write good action scenes. That was another reason I kind of got into the adventure books. It's why I did Quicksands. I'm trying to play to my strengths a little bit, and I'm hoping that I'll grow as you know, as you grow in wisdom and as a writer, I'm hoping as the years go on, I'll get better and keep getting better and better and better. And someday I'll be able to do what you're doing. Take some chances with a little more confidence. You know, I got a rejection from Marion Zimmer Bradley once. I know that's not an unpopular name, but she pounded me over the head, and it was basically, you can't write whatever you want. This is a magazine about fantasy, and what you sent me is blah blah. She's like, I love the story, but I can't publish this here. And it was like, that was an eye opener. But it took years and years and years to kind of really understand, how long did it take you to understand what kill your darlings meant, right? There's people, what does that mean, Ed? What does it mean? It's like, I can't explain it to you, right? Kill your darlings means something you really love, but shouldn't be there. You're being too witty, you thought you're being too smart, you're being too funny, and 9 times out of 10, it blows up in your face. That's what it means to me.
We've touched on him a few times, but tell me about Theo Ramage and those stories.
Yeah, so Theo is, I made up a new category in the world. He's an ex-data psychic. He was not a tough guy. He was a back office guy. His wife was the tough guy. She was a Secret Service personnel who guarded a senator, and she saved the senator's life, and she was shot by a militant group down in Nicaragua, I think she was from. And that's and then he and his wife's partner kind of didn't handle it too well, and they went down there and they tried to take care of these people, the family who, was going to kill the senator, but accidentally ended up killing his wife. And they get involved in a little bloodbath down there. And this is all backstory. You don't really find out until Sandbagged, actually, a lot of it. The actual story, he doesn't actually tell it until the second book. But they get caught, but because these guys were terrorists and they know the story, they busted the FBI guy down a few ranks, and they kind of let Ramage go. But he's still, he's on probation, if you will. They have a fancier term for it, but essentially he's on probation. And because of his skills, they call on him on occasion to look at data and try and formulate hypotheses for him, and blah, blah, blah. So the story starts, he's basically just driving a truck, driving around the country. He's delivering Christmas trees from Pennsylvania down south, and he gets mugged by two low-level mob guys from Texas. They take his truck, they take all his stuff, they leave him knocked out in a parking lot with nothing. He's got the clothes on his back and a credit card in his back pocket. And that starts the story. And then he goes on a Reacher-like quest, man, to, get his truck back, find these people, and this just leads into a whole much bigger story. The crux of the crime, which really drew me into the first book, and why I wrote it, was I came up with such a cool crime. So the story takes place in the Permian Basin, which is in Texas. It's one of the hottest shale oil areas on the planet. They're squeezing a lot of oil out of a lot of stone down there. And as a result, sand has become incredibly valuable. So it was worthless years ago because they actually don't like Texas sand because the granulates aren't round enough. But because there's so much drilling going on there, Texas sand is now worth over $100 a ton. And that's real, right? Yeah. That's real. That's in real world. So Reacher comes across Anna, who he kind of falls in love with. It's a romance in the book as well, little romance. Because people are stealing the sand from her ranch. Like literally they're stealing her sand to use in these fracking things. And that's how Ramage gets sucked into the whole story, because as he starts digging, of course, they find a much bigger plot, and there's the local bad guy. He goes up against the local bad guy, and the story progresses. It's generally fun. It's meant to be fun. It's not overly violent, I don't think. But, he's like a Reacher light, kind of, because he didn't come from that hardcore background. But I did fill it. His name, I spent a lot of time on the name. He's named after Theodore Roosevelt, right? Speak softly, carry a big stick. Mm-hmm. And and Ramage was from damage.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was playing with the word damage, and I came up with Ramage. It's some of the things that I've learned. Names are so important. Like
Right.
back in the day, I would pay no attention to this, Jay. I would just be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, that's his name. I gave it no thought whatsoever. But now I actually give it a lot of thought. If we're going to use a nickname through the whole book, are we going to use their last name? I really give a lot of thought to that. So it was Ramage, damage, Ramage. It kind of hits you. So only his mom calls him Theo, and Anna, of course, occasionally joking with him. And I don't even know if she knows his full name, but that's where he came from. He's somewhat of, my father read the book before it was published, which he rarely does, and he said, I see a lot of you in there. And I said, no. I said, that's just me being lazy. He goes, what do you mean? I'm like, you get to a point sometimes in a book and you need some backstory, you use your own.
Yeah.
And he just happened to recognize it because a couple of the points, like if you knew me really, really well, you'd be
Right.
like, oh, you did that, that, and that. But, I have to explain to him, no one else knows that except you, Dad. You're the only one on the earth that knows that.
Yeah.
So no one else knows that was really my experience in that situation. So, I cheated a little bit with Ramage, also to try and make it more personal, to try and bring my own emotion into it. I find that's tough. I find with the action scenes, I get into them really, and I just lose myself. The emotional stuff requires a little more work for me, because I'm always concerned that it's coming off as, flaky and fluffy. I read some of these books and I say to myself, it's so overboard. But, you talk about that's what they like. You have to remember it's escapism. They're not coming to these books for reality. They're coming because they want to forget about reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I really try. I want people to read Quicksands, and I want them to enjoy it. And the reason I love the way, there's going to be at least 3 books in the series, because they're a lot of work. It's got a book pub. It's going to be a featured release in the action adventure category in May 18th, I think. So that's going to be a big push. I got a bunch of promotions going on release day on the 6th. I'm doing all this kind of stuff. I don't do any of this for my other books. I don't, I would normally be writing right now.
Yeah.
But, when you put yourself out there, Quicksands, I put myself out there. This is not my genre. I'm not known for this. I really want to give this thing a push because I think it's good, and I think people would like it.
Looking at your career then, when you go back to when you're stapling zines and you come up to now, where you're trying to promote your ebook, how dramatic have those shifts been over all those decades for you, as you've kind of tried to not just evolve as a writer but evolve as on the business side of writing?
Yeah. So on the business side, I'm incredibly deficient, where in the past it was all business. I think I saw the Kindle thing coming.
Yeah.
But I was late to react. Without Kindle, I have no writing career. Without electronic books, I have zero writing career, and I have zero readers. So for me, the innovation aspect of it has essentially made my career. When I talk about thousands of readers, man, I'm talking about ebooks. I mean, I sell a few print books, it's okay, but and it makes money for the press and for me, but most of it is in ebooks. So without Kindle and ebooks, I basically would have no career. But it's a good, and I learned from that, and it's a great question, because last night I pressed the button on my first, I'm going to say this wrong, Velo?
Oh, yeah. Kindle
okay. Vela. So the Amazon Vela, that new project. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to miss the boat this time. I waited last time. I was late as a lot of us were late. We were late to the game, or things might be a lot different. But I said, you know what? I have this kid's novel. It's science fiction, young adult. So I pulled it out. And it actually was already broken up into 3 books. The first book was called Oasis Maze. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I wrote myself some tease copies, so it's the first, I forget what I called it. I don't even remember. It's not called, I called it a series. So the first series, because they're episodes, they're not chapters, they're called episodes. And a beautiful piece of artwork and a nice cover, and I put it up, and I put the first 2 chapters up. I put the whole thing up. I hit publish, and now I have no idea what's going on.
Right.
The technology aspect of it is great for me as a writer. The business side, I feel like I've never been a publisher before in my life. I honestly feel, and the Amazon platform is relatively simple, but it's constantly changing, and the advertising platform and and all that is like, oh my God. I'm just starting to kind of get that down a little bit. Dogs Get 10 Lives did okay, but it was a learning experience, and anytime you're learning, you don't get all the results you want, but it did okay. And I'm hoping that with the series and with being able to apply what I've learned from the business aspect of it, pricing, all this stuff that you and Armand do without even like thinking about it because you've been doing it so long. That's how you got to get. You got to get to the point where you're comfortable. And I think, and that would be the advice I would give any new writer. When you get to a certain point where you're comfortable with your work, there's nothing wrong with taking control of a few of your own projects. I don't think it can be all that you do, and I don't think it should be the first thing that you do. I didn't publish I could have self-published my first novel, but there is something to be said for having some level of judgment over your work. And, you said it at the beginning, there's so much out there now, and there's already such a perception that, most of it is garbage, that you have to be, and a lot of it is garbage,
Right,
let's be honest.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop a lot of it from selling. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff I've seen on Amazon just boggles my mind, and I don't understand how it's done. But that being said, that's life. So you need, but there's a difference between being a published author and a self-published author. And I think, you kind of get to a point where you can do your own thing. And everybody has a different line where that is. And, some folks maybe they draw that line a little too low and they don't set that bar a little high enough. But who am I? Who am I to say that? You got to do what gets you through. Writing these things are hard. What do they say? 1% of them, you put you in pretty rarefied air, to quote you, Jay. That just to complete a novel, I know how hard it is. So I give people a lot of credit, and they're very eager to get it out there. You put in all this work, but it's absolutely the worst thing you can do. And I'm happy I listened to professionals. I had access to professionals, Alan, Steve, people I could ask, and they said, Ed, put the book to the side and ignore it, pretend you didn't write it. Someday you'll be able to go back to it and see it for what it is. But right now, move on to your next book.
Yeah.
I think that was really, really solid advice. But hey, that worked for me, and that's not for everybody. And I have a few novels that are like that I sent out and people didn't love them. And I'm like, wow, if, these top 3 or 4 places aren't into it, then it ain't all that. And it needs more work. And maybe someday, it'll get it. But I have to say, we're lucky when it comes to publishers. You got Crystal Lake, you got Severed, this new Silver Shamrock, I'm excited. I mean, I have novels on my board that I'm writing for these guys.
Before we go, let's look at the release dates. When is Quicksands coming out?
Quicksands is on May 6th, and the big release is actually May 18th, but it's available for purchase on May 6th.
All right.
And then we got Sandbagged is going to drop in August. And then Too Much Grit will be the beginning of 2000. What year are we in? 22.
22.
So that actually is going to drop on my birthday, which will be January 12th, 2022. So they're going to be out really, in close proximity. Quicksands is done. Sandbagged is done. Too Much Grit. I'm actually in the throes of writing it right now. I'm almost done with it. Really happy with how it came out. The plot progressed, and as you can see from the titles, we're moving through and away from the original plot of the sand theft, and it progresses into a much bigger kind of story as Ramage goes about his life. It's actually, I should mention, Quicksands is actually 99 cents on release day. For the first week, it's going to be 99 cents because I'm really pushing. And then it's going up after that. So, but not much, the bid on release day, I'm going to have it at $2.95 or something like that. And all the pre-orders on the other 2 books are low now too, really low. And that's it.
Thank you for being on the show, Edward. And I look forward to talking to everybody again next time.
I'm really
good,
proud.
Man. I'm looking forward to these.
What do you think of those covers, man?
They're sharp. They grab attention. I was, of course, we're looking at a scene right now. I had to put this together, so pulling images and putting them up and stuff. It's just the very sharp, the color choices, the kind of intrigue, because you're kind of getting hints of a story there too.
Yep.
But yeah, I think those are real eye grabbing, and what you've described about the story, it fits well into that thriller category that the readers like. But it sounds like you've put your own mark on it, because it does. You have people. I have people describe books to me all the time, and I never say anything to anybody. But sometimes when they're describing a book, it's like, okay, I feel like I've read that before, But like you put some effort into finding something that, like, I don't think I've seen in a thriller before. The ideas are there. I guess the footprint of the genre is there, which I think is important. But I do feel like you've come up with something that I haven't seen before. So I'm excited to.
Thank you.
I'm excited.